Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and RockerMike on the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my ears. Oh, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show. The Rock Show, oh, I want the Rock Show. The Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show. I want the Rock Show. Let's get lumped up.
Hello, people, and I have the great RockerMike. I'm Rob Rossi, and this is the 160th Rock Show episode. And Mike got a special episode for you guys. Mike, who are we talking about today?
We're talking about the great Dave Edmunds, rockabilly guitarist, producer, member of Rockpile, collaborator with so many different bands. Very well respected in the business, and kind of ties into the show we did last week with Nick Lowe, because he did play in Rockpile with Nick Lowe and produced some of his stuff and did some of his music. So they're kind of intertwined. And actually, I did it again, Rob.
So Mike, I'm gonna hit you off the chart.
Yeah.
So one of our listeners that loves the show, he say, "How does RockerMike pick the bands?" I said, I don't even have that. I don't even have that answer. How do you pick the shows? Like, you keep doing shows, but everything's interconnected. Do you do it on purpose, or what is your secret?
I give it a little thought, and I say, okay, who haven't we talked about yet, or whatever, and I try to pick things that are a little out of the mainstream. Okay, though we've done mainstream shit, Guns N' Roses, things like, but, I always treat this show like Rock and Roll 101. We're going to learn about the important people as well as the people you might have heard of because they sold a lot of records. All right. So, but one thing that happens, and I was just going to say this, and I don't know how I do it. We've talked about it before, is like Nick Lowe to Dave Edmunds is a straight line because they were in bands together, played together. But what I didn't realize, what I did is next week's show is Foghat. Okay. And Dave Edmunds produced the first Foghat record. So, how did I do that? I don't know.
So, Mike, this is the other question. So one of our viewers asked, why are we doing a show on MTV video? Just talking about MTV and the creation.
Like classic MTV videos?
No, I mean, like when MTV first, we were there when MTV first started. So somebody want to know our first reaction. What did we think? Did it change the music vision? So I think that's something.
That's an interesting. We could do like how did videos affect the music business, that kind of thing. You know,
Video killed the radio star.
first one they ever played. I actually watched that video the other night when I was getting lumped up. It was like 4:00 in the morning. I was like, "Oh shit, I haven't seen this in a while."
Wow. So let's get back to Dave.
Yeah, so we got Dave Edmunds is he only had 2 hits in the United States. A song called "I Hear You Knocking" and a song called "Slipping Away." But he was very important in really both sides of the Atlantic, what was going on in the 70s and 80s. So he's a Welsh guy. He was born in Cardiff, Wales on April 15th, 1944. Now, he was a bit of a child prodigy, okay, because he was playing in a piano band with his brother when he was 10, his older brother.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, in 1954, he had this band called the Edmunds Brothers Duo, and he was playing piano. But that would, in a couple of years, that would turn into more rock-oriented stuff. Definitely rockabilly music is a big part of his sound. Not everything.
He's definitely like one of the first creator of rockabilly, because that really came out of him.
Well, he wasn't a creator of rockabilly, but he kept the genre going when it was really kind of no one else was doing it.
To me, he was the first one that I was like, "This is rockabilly." Like I knew rockabilly, but nobody didn't like him. Like he was
there. I mean, he was part of the kind of the Teddy Boy scene in England in the 50s and early 60s. He was young.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So shortly after the Edmunds Brothers Duo, he was with his brother again in a band called Stompers, a band called Heartbeats. That was around 1957. He was the first group that he kind of fronted, okay, was a band called the rockabilly style trio, the Raiders, okay, out of the Cardiff section of Wales. They formed in 1961 with Brian Rockhouse Davies on bass, Ken Collier on drums, and Dave Edmunds singing and playing guitar. Edmunds was the only constant of this group. There was a couple of different members. Later, they included bassist Mick Still and Bob Congo Jones on drums. Congo Jones would be somebody that would play with him for a few different types of bands he was in.
I love that name.
Congo. Yeah. The Raiders were very popular in the south of Wales in the early 60s. Now, in 1966, after a short spell on a Parlophone Records band, Parlophone Records, Nick Lowe was on them in the late 60s. We talked about that. This is maybe just a couple of years before. He was in a band called The Image, and at that point, he was shifting to kind of more of a blues rock sound. He put together with Congo Jones and bassist John Williams and an extra guitarist named Mickey Gee. He started a band called the Human Beans. Now, it was spelled Human Beans, Beans, and not to be confused with the Human Beings who had that song, No. That's not the same band, okay?
But like beans, like Mexican beans, like beans that make you go to the bathroom.
Like refried beans, right, exactly.
Refried beans.
So the Human Beings played mostly around London and the college scene in England. They would record a cover of a song called Morning Dew on the British Columbia label, and this didn't chart at all. It bombed. Now, after 18 months, the core of that band, okay, which was Edmunds, Jones, and Williams, they would form a trio called Love Sculpture.
That's a much better name.
Their first, what'd you say?
That's a much better name.
A little bit better than Human Beings, right?
Human Beings, I just dropped some human beings in the bathroom. I took the Browns to the Super Bowl.
their first single in 1968 was called "River to Another Day." Didn't go anywhere, but their second single, which was a song called "Saber Dance," and this would be an instrumental okay, but it was becoming a hit. It became sort of a novelty hit. It was a reworking of Cacciatorian's classical piece of the same name, Saber Dance, but it was done in like a all guitar, almost rockabilly-ish sound, very fast, okay? And DJ John Peel picked up on it and started to play it on his show called Top
You know
Gear.
what's funny? How amazing it is that people make a remake and it does better than the original, especially.
Oh, well, it was a classical. It was a classical song. If you hear it, you're like, I've heard this before. But the way they do it is just it's rock and roll. They do it great. So it ended up.
Like that.
Yeah, it ended up going to top 5. Okay, and it was actually a hit, a little bit of a hit in the United States. It had a little bit of notoriety. Now, Love Sculpture, after 2 albums, would break up, and Dave Edmunds decided to go solo after that. Now, he would have a Christmas time hit of a song called I Hear You Knocking, okay? It went to number 1 in the UK, okay? And it went to number 4 in the US. All right. This was a cover of a guy named Smiley Lewis that Edmunds came across when he was producing Shakin' Stevens and the Sunsets. Their very first album together. Shakin' Stevens had been around in different formats, but Shakin' Stevens and the Sunsets was the first band that one of the first bands that Edmunds had ever produced. So he was producing their record. He came across this song, but originally, now he wanted to do a song called Let's Work Together, which was done originally by Wilbert Harrison. It ended up that the band Canned Heat beat him to it, but he had an arrangement of that song that he wanted to do, and what he did was he took that same arrangement and he put it into the song I Hear You Knocking. So it ended up being a hit anyway. It went to number 1 in England, and it went to number 4 in America. And it was the very first song, or single, I should say, on his manager's new label called MAM Records. So it really brought attention to Dave Edmunds at this point. And this was about like 1970, 71. Okay, so when he recorded I Hear You Knocking, it was a big hit. And there was a record label called EMI Regal Zonophone Records. They had an option on his contract that they could call. Because of this big hit, what they did is they basically took control of his next album, which was the 1972 album called Rockpile. Okay. Now, Rockpile would become a band that he would be in later, but he actually had an album called Rockpile before that. Okay.
Yeah.
And sadly, because of this takeover of this album, where they said, you're on our label, all the momentum that he had from 71 with that song I Hear You Knocking kind of fizzled. So that kind of messed up his career a little bit. But record company bullshit, record company bullshit that happens. So at this point, he decided, an off the cuff decision, he was going to take an acting role. Okay. And he was in the David Essex film Stardust. David Essex, you might know him. He had one hit in America, the song Rock On. You know that song with a lot of echo in the background?
Yeah, I remember Rock On. Yeah, I remember Rock On.
Right. Now, after learning the trade of producer, he would kind of hone his trade, and what his biggest influence really as far as producing was Phil Spector. So at this point he was becoming, well, just to mention with the movie, he just had a little role as a band member in David Essex's band, but it's the only movie that Dave Edmunds ever did. But as far as the producing, he was starting to be serious about this, and he was interested in producing some of the pub rock bands that were very popular in the early to mid 70s in England. This is where he met Brinsley Schwarz. Okay, Brinsley Schwarz, we talked about last week, was Nick Lowe's band. Okay, yep. And he produced the Flaming Groovies, okay, another band we talked about a couple of years ago. And he produced the blues rock band Foghat's new album, which was their debut album, actually, I should say. Next week we'll be talking about Foghat. Now,
that's what I'd say. The way you pick.
I don't know. Sometimes I don't know how I do it. I really, it's in my head, But Edmunds bought a house in Rockfield, Monmouth, which was a few miles away from Charles and Kingsley Ward's Rockfield Studios. He became a permanent fixture there at that studio for almost 20 years. He would do all his work there. Okay. And again, his main influence was Phil Spector. And it was not unusual for him to have like 40 guitar tracks and layer them all on top of each other to create a wall sound. Very similar to the way Phil Spector worked.
Yeah. He's a lot like a producer, but he's also another guy. He's more on sounds. And a lot of people, you know what, that's the thing in the business. Some people either love it or hate it. But I think the one sound is great when you record it.
Well, you get what you pay for. When you want that wall of sound, you get it, So he would release another solo record in 1975, and it was called Subtle as a Flying Mallet. The Brinsley-Schwartz connection brought about an ongoing collaboration with Nick Lowe. And in 1976, the two of them started a band called Rockpile. Okay, very influential band. Now, it was named after Dave's solo record from a couple of years earlier. Guitarist Billy Bremer and Terry Williams on drums were brought in, and then they rounded up the lineup. Now, because Edmunds and Lowe were signed to different labels that year, they couldn't record anything as Rockpile. So what they did, and we talked about this last week, is many of their solo LPs, the solo albums, like Nick Lowe's Labor of Lust and Edmunds' Repeat when necessary, they were really Rockpile records with those members, but they would call them either a Nick Lowe record or an Edmunds record.
Why did they have to do that? Like
they were on two different labels together, like the two of them. So they were exclusionary. It was exclusive to the different labels that they were on. They couldn't record for another label. You'd have a problem. So they had to do it as solo records. Now, Edmunds would have more of the hits actually at this time. There was a song called Girls Talk, a song called I Knew the Bride. I Knew the Bride when she used to rock and roll, that song. A song called Crawling from the Wreckage. And also Melvin Ensley's Singing the Blues, which was a kind of country rock hit. All those songs were hits for Edmunds, and they were put under it was the Rockpile lineup, but under the Edmunds name. Now, the album Repeat When Necessary and the single Girls Talk both received silver awards by the British phonographic industry in 1980. So he was being recognized as somebody very important. Now, unexpectedly, though, after the release of the first and only Rockpile record called Seconds of Pleasure in 1980, the band broke up. Now, post-breakup, the band did a video for the song Girls Talk, which was filmed on the roof of the Warner Brothers building in Midtown Manhattan. Very cool video. Edmunds, Edmunds would spend the 1980s pretty much collaborating with many different artists and producing a whole assortment of them, including Paul McCartney, King's Kurt, the Stray Cats, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, and Status Quo. So he was involved with all different kinds of music, being known as a very good producer.
I guess he's like us. We listen to all kind of music. And that's what he did. As a producer, you should listen to kind of music. You can get a beat, you can get a rhythm, you can get a dance, and you bring the right people to you.
Right. And, if you're just a good producer, people want to work with you. It doesn't necessarily matter what you've done, music-wise. But, producing is the key. So
I think you would make a great producer. You got a keen eye for good music.
Thank you. I'd like to get involved with that. But
we should get involved with that. The Lumped Up record label.
Getting Lumped Up Entertainment Records.
The Glue.
Glue Records.
Well, it's like the Toyota.
what happened next is he would be asked to do the soundtrack to the sequel to Porky's Revenge. Okay.
Oh my God, that was a great movie.
Yeah, and he supplied the main theme song called High School Nights. He was also the musical director for a TV special starring Carl Perkins with an assorted guest list of like Ringo Starr, George Harrison, Roseanne Cash. By 1989, he was asked to produce Dion's comeback album called Yo Frankie, which was very critically acclaimed. We talked about Dion not that long ago, right? In 1983, he would release a solo record called Information. And 2 songs on this album were collaborations with Jeff Lynne from ELO. One song was called Slippin' Away. And you might remember this song because it was an MTV hit. It was a video. He's playing like in a studio, but there's lots of scenes cut in with like race car, like stock car driving around and people crashing into each other and shit. It's a cool video.
I remember that 100%.
Yeah. And it got a little bit of radio airplay. It ended up going to number 39 in the U.S. charts. It was really his second American hit, which would be the 2 that he would have. The first being I Can Hear You Knocking a few years earlier. But the video did get heavy rotation on MTV, so it did very well. But for some reason, the album did not do well in the UK. It did good here, but not in the UK. So in 1984, Jeff Lynne from ELO got together with Edmunds again and produced 6 songs for the follow-up record called Riff Raff. That album did a little bit better in the UK. Now, the second half of the 1980s, Edmunds recorded less frequently, okay, but occasionally he would still tour. By 1992, he joined up with Ringo Starr and his all-star band. You know, Ringo used to go out with that. And he joined him in 1992. He also joined him in 2000. I got to see him on that tour, which was great. That was the only time I ever saw David.
What venue did you see him at?
Jones Beach. Yeah, it was outside.
You know, Jones Beach is actually a great venue where you can actually go see them.
Yeah, when Ringo was doing these shows, he played most. It was like every year, every other year, he'd come around. He usually played Jones Beach. So by 2007, he started touring again much more frequently. He toured with Joe Brown around the UK, and he also joined the Stray Cats on stage in September of 2008 at the Brixton Academy during one of their shows. He just popped up on stage, and he played the tracks "The Race Is On" and "Tear It Up" with the Stray Cats. 2 great songs.
Tear it up.
Yep. Now, in 93, though, he started having some problems. He was facing some legal troubles. Him and Shakin' Stevens, if you remember Shakin' Stevens and the Sunsets, Shakin' Stevens and him were accused of non-payment for royalties for the other guys in the Sunsets when that album was re-released in the 80s on CD, and it did very well. Okay, he apparently did not pay these guys. Okay, these guys' names were Robert Llewellyn, Carl Peterson, Steve Piercy, and Paul Dolan. Those were the members of the Sunsets. Now, the court ruled in their favor, okay, and they had to pay $70,000, or excuse me, 70,000 pounds in back pay royalties to these guys, which they would split 4 ways. But that wasn't the end of it. Shakin' Stevens and Dave Edmunds had to pay the legal fees for everybody, which came to 500,000 pounds. Eesh. Yeah. Right? Look, and that's not like I'm sure he had the money, but I mean, like that had to be a big nut to do that. You know, I mean, you'd be pissed. You know, but I don't know why he didn't. I don't know why he didn't pay them. You know, it just doesn't make sense. Now, on New Year's Eve in 2008, he appeared on Jules' annual Hootenanny, performing "Girls Talk" and "I Can Hear You Knocking." He was also Holland's guest again. Jules' annual Hootenanny is something that's done in Holland.
I love that. The Hootenanny.
Hootenanny, yeah.
You had a Hootenanny.
Right. over the next year, he would do a whole bunch of shows in Holland and in the UK, including playing the Albert Hall by November 27, 2009, which
Wow.
is a big deal. He returned and performed the song Saber Dance on Jules' annual Hootenanny on the 2009-2010 edition. An album release in November of 2013 was called ... Again. Okay. And it featured recordings from the 90s. Perhaps some people hadn't heard that stuff. Okay. And 4 new tracks. And it was his first record in 20 years, almost 20 years that he put out. By 2015, he released his first instrumental album called On Guitar, Dave Edmunds' Rags and Classics. And it featured instrumentals of like the Beach Boys' God Only Knows and Elton John's Your Song. Kind of a comeback record, but it would be his last. Okay. Dave is, right after that record came out, he played his final gig in 2017, and retired from the business. Okay. Now, I was trying to find out exactly why, and I had heard he was sick. I think, and I don't want to say I'm 100% sure, but I think he has some form of Alzheimer's or something like that. Okay. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. I saw a couple of contradicting things on the internet. But, yeah, sad. I mean, he's now, he just turned 70, right? He was born at 44. He just turned 78. Okay. So let's hope he's in good health. Wish him all the best. But Dave Edmunds, very important guy. I'm glad we got to talk about him. What do you think, Rob?
It's incredible. Like, you know what this guy did? He's a guy that he was a musician. He worked with a lot of people. He became a producer. And he just, I think he got the love for the business. He got the love for the business, and he works hard. You know, not too many people do that. And he worked to his credit that he made it. You know,
he had a great reputation. Okay, and everybody wanted to work with him. So yeah, you're right in that way.
But
yeah.
That's the same thing. Like everybody wanted to work with David Bowie. Everybody wanted to work with Phil Spector. You know, you get these producers, you get these guys that they become so iconic that what can you do? You want to work with them. I want this guy doing my album. I want that guy doing my album. You know?
Yeah. I mean, the Stray Cats Rant and Rave record, I believe, is the one that's produced by David. That's like my favorite record from them. I mean, it's amazing.
I love the Stray Cats. You know, Mike, this is a guy that I didn't really know about until you pointed it out at me. I never heard of this guy. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love this show so much, because you bring up people that we don't know. You were like, let's talk about this guy. Let's talk about that guy. Yeah. And, you know, that's a credit to your craft.
Thank you. And I mean, it's like I said at the beginning of the show, I treat the show like Rock and Roll 101. Let's, you know, we'll talk about the stuff everybody knows, but we'll talk about the stuff maybe you didn't hear of. You know, it's not all going to be mainstream, because rock and roll has all different facets to it.
I still hate Fishbone.
Facebook sucks.
And fish.
Fishbone, right?
I hate Fishbone and fish.
Yeah. So, all right. So, if anybody wants my social media handles, you can find me on Instagram, RockerMike212, RockerMike212. You can find me on Twitter, RockerMike212. I'm also on CloutHub, MeWe, Truth Social, Getter, all under RockerMike. And of course,
send me a thing together and Truth Social, because I'm not on there. I think I want to put up videos.
Yeah, you should. They're starting to take off. And also, of course, I'm on Facebook as RockoMike. We all know why, RockoMike, and the Rock Show podcast group page. Just check us out there for our songs of the day and all info and everything like that. Where can we find you, Rob?
I would like to tell you people that I'm like a priest. Even though you shoot up a train, you come talk to me, I'm not going to rat you out.
Lumped up.
But you can find me at any social media, Getting Lumped Up. Go on the Rockshow Rock page. It's doing very well. We have a lot of members in there. I credit that to Mike. Also, If you don't get it lumped up, we're everywhere. We're like a virus, except for YouTube that they like to cancel us once in a while because they get angry. But
It only happened once. Fuck them.
hopefully, Elon Musk will buy YouTube and Twitter and
You should buy the whole internet.
all.
You should buy the whole internet.
Actually, me and Mike would like to give YouTube $1
Yeah.
to buy it.
That's all it's worth.
So,
Like CNN, 50 cents.
yeah. So, Mike, thank you for another great show. We got a lot of great shows coming on. People, please, so the conspiracy theory got a little fucked by YouTube, and we're putting it on other social media. So if you want to see the conspiracy theory, go on Porter. And I get the link to Mike. We got a thing, but we're doing, because we do some controversy thing that some people don't like it. And I'm just saying that.
We'll work that problem out. But Conspiracy 420, it's still going on. We're still making the episodes.
We still make the episode. Listen to the podcast because it's on Anchor.
Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher. Just look under Getting Lumped Up on the regular podcast.
It's amazing how everybody else has it except for YouTube.
They don't want to see our ugly faces. Fuck them.
You know what? We're two beautiful motherfuckers, man. I don't know about you, but my mommy told me I was sexy. And Mike's married to a beautiful woman. We got sex appeal.
Mm-hmm.
So other than that, remember, people, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
See you next week.
Take care, people.
The only podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on the Rock Show.